If you look over the last 10 or 15 years, retail has been the dominant growth, and that's been driven by some of the macro forces. And I think some of the macro forces you see in South Africa, you're seeing elsewhere. But more recently, over the last 5 years, if you look at the data in South Africa, you've seen the performance of the different sectors evening out. Industrial has performed particularly well over the last while.
Why would you say retail has been performing particularly well there? What trends have you noticed?
I think it's all about the macro trends. It's really around the growth up the LSM, the different income categories. It's driven by strong growth over the last 10 years. It's driven by above inflation increase, particularly in the government. It's driven by the switch from into formal retail. I mean, the formal retail, if you go back some time, was a lot lower than now. We're in South Africa, formal retail 70%. And there's a switch to how people operate. Go to shopping centres, you see in categories like leisure and clothing or what have you, showing huge increases in sales. And that's certainly benefited the retail shopping centre, the retail property market.
Let's move on. Looking at Old Mutual's growth strategy in Africa, what regions are you looking at?
Well, I think Old Mutual's been, as a business, has been very, very strong in the Southern Africa. We've had business in Zimbabwe and Namibia, Malawi, Kenya for many, many years. So it's really Southern Africa, Eastern African bloc, and Western African around Nigeria. I think those are the blocks that tend to be moving, growing strongly. Also tend to be more English speaking, so that kind of helps from a growth point of view. And I think there's enormous challenges, and those tend to be also the areas where, where our base in South Africa is, and elsewhere in Africa, that we can follow our clients and tenants into those markets.
Looking now to South Africa, the interest rate cycle, we've been keeping interest rates very low. We're about to have a monetary council meeting with regards to the interest rate. What do you expect it to be levied at the same rate? What are the implications there on the property market?
We don't see interest rates increasing for some period of time, and I think generally, if you look at the consensus forecasts, people aren't seeing an increase. In fact, it is possible at some point it increase and may actually decrease. And that's in the context of the world environment, where the world's got low interest rates and inflation's under control. So we don't see that changing at all at the moment.
What trends have you noticed with regards to green building in the property market? That seems to be gaining strong momentum.
Yeah, well, it's interesting actually. Here in Cape Town, we're building a building around the corner which is 30 stories called Portside. It's a four-star building. It's attracting a lot of interest, and clearly tenants coming into buildings like that really are concerned about sustainability, as we are, and they're also concerned about keeping operating costs and the like down. So it's clear a trend. I think it's a definite trend that continue, particularly in the office market, but also certainly the other markets.
Looking at the current status of the property market in South Africa and trying to project that onto the continent, would you say it's a buyer's or seller's market at the moment?
No, look, I think in terms of, if you look at sub-Saharan growth, GDP growth, which a lot of it's followed by sub-Saharan, is growing at like 6%, where in world terms is very, very good. So I think a lot of our local business in South Africa are moving north, particularly the retailers, the banks are moving northwards. They see huge growth. On the back of that growth, and particularly in these countries, the population is getting wealthier. On the back of those mega trends, we should see a good demand for property.
On the back of that growth and good demand for property, which sector of the property market do you highlight as being attractive? You said retail has been outperforming others, but what about residential and industrial?
I think, particularly industrial, we see industrial warehousing being a strong market. I think it's very difficult in property to generalize. I think if you're looking at heavy use industrial, we don't see that to be strong. But more light and industrial warehousing, very strong. That's in the back of also the retail trend. Retailers need distribution centres. Those sort of things are going to be demand for. Certainly those are some of the drivers we see.